tropical rainforests of the planet have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. They are prehistoric environments allowing us a glimpse of the beginning of time on Earth. This is a colossal though fragile world. No other habitat can rival it in number of species. Dense, unbroken vegetation, interrupted only by enormous rivers of dark waters or by more modest channels that scarp the landscape. Here the forces of nature unleashed in all their fury. A spectacle which has always amazed and moved man, crushing our pride as it reminds us of the fragility of our existence. Here in the penumbra of the jungle, beneath the canopy of the green giants whose tops stand 40 or 50 meters above us, the inhabitants of this green universe struggle to survive in a dynamic in which the predator can rapidly become the prey, where the cycle of life and death is constantly repeated, leaving no room for the weak who are inexorably exterminated. Once again, man is the species that dominates all others. His intelligence and his inventiveness have made him the most feared, most specialized predator. These men of the forest know no other habitat. Their age-old culture has developed here in what some Western travelers have called the Green Hell, a world that is coming to an end, due to the ambition and the base interests of the lumber industries and those who come to strip the forest bare of its natural treasures. Our film crew, on their constant travels in search of the last nomads in the world, were now sailing along the River Parucito in the heart of the Venezuelan jungle. They're going to meet the Hoti, one of the few surviving nomadic groups in the South American jungle. This is a virgin region, almost intact, with an amazing variety of life forms, as witnessed by the constant encounters with all types of animals, such as the freshwater bottlenose dolphins that followed our boats, now extinct in many rivers of the Amazon basin. Sailing along the river proved to be a real ordeal. There was very little current, and we often came across trees that had fallen when the level of the river was high, blocking our way. We had to saw through them in order to be able to continue. It is an area of low mountains and very dense forest. The course of the River Parucito winds through this forest in a constant succession of sharp bends. The river constantly gave warnings of its danger. It was infected with piranhas which shared the waters with leeches, electric eels, and the terrible rays, which remain buried in the sandy riverbed with their poisonous stings ready to inject their evil load into anyone who strays into their territory. Slowly we advanced in a kind of gymkhana towards the head of the Parucito, where the Hoti territory lies. The little information on the Hotis we had managed to obtain from the Yequana Indians, the only ones that have sporadic contact with them, indicated that they were in a mountainous area of very difficult access. No one had seen them for months. After 4 days sailing, we came across this enormous trunk across the river. Finally, we had arrived. The Hoti used them as bridges. The old lianas tying the dilapidated rails were evidence that the trunk had been used as a crossing. Shortly afterwards, we met a Hoti family beside a small stream. At first they were rather indifferent, though their looks revealed curiosity. It really had been worth all the effort getting here. Before us stood the living testimony of an ancient culture. These human beings of the rainforest seemed to have stepped right out of our own prehistory. We were soon able to note their incredible adaptation and specialization to their world of dense vegetation. They are hunters and gatherers, though in recent years, through contacts with other neighboring tribes, they have learned to grow small crops of cassava and yam. But their basic diet still depends on hunting. They use spears and blowpipes, their only weapons. The Hoti do not know the bow and arrow. They live in family groups of 2 or 3 huts. They don't group together in settlements. Sometimes between one family and another, there is a distance of 10 or 20 kilometers. This factor, along with the remoteness and the difficulties in penetrating this region of virgin jungle, has kept them isolated and preserved their culture. They build 2 types of home. A temporary one, little more than a simple windbreak, which they use when traveling, and the permanent one, of which they usually have several at different locations. Their permanent huts are of rectangular ground plan. The gabled roof, made of woven leaves, reaches to the ground, forming the walls. They sleep in cotton hammocks dyed with anato, which they weave themselves. They kill time cleaning each other of parasites and eating the little insects that proliferate inside the houses, such as bugs, lice, flies, and the malignant mosquitoes, the causes of malaria, the main disease they suffer from. Their household utensils are composed mainly of baskets, clay pots, gourd recipients, torches, basins, mats, and trays. The dog, their only domestic animal, is very important, as it is used in hunting. It lives with them inside the hut and enjoys the attention and affection of the head of the family. All the elements they use to build the huts are obtained from forest plants. The Hoti are almost entirely unaffected by outside cultures. Only certain household utensils of metal, such as the pans and the machetes, are alien to their traditions. They obtain them by bartering meat and furs with some neighboring tribes more affected by outside influences, such as the Enyepa, the Panare, or the Equana. There are very few ethnographic studies on the Hotis. The first reference to these nomadic tribes dates from 1913, and indirectly through the stories some Yequanas told to a Catholic missionary about the existence of a group of wild natives that lived in a territory bounded by the basins of the Caura, the Erebato, and the Ventuauri. The first scientific investigation was carried out by the anthropologist Cruchent in 1961. He made the first contact with a group of 14 individuals who still used stone axes. In 1976, Walter Coppens carried out a study on the Hotis of the Caima region. Since then, there have been sporadic encounters, but certain Hoti groups still live in almost absolute isolation. We were the first professional film crew to reach them, and we felt the emotion of filming something truly unknown. A unique way of life which had barely changed in the past 3,000 or 4,000 years. They make their own curare, which they spread on the darts of their blowpipes, turning them into deadly weapons. Even the largest prey, such as the peccaries, bears, tapirs, or deer, succumb if they are hit by the poisonous Hoti darts. The meat is shared among the entire group. Normally it is cooked by the first wife of the hunter. Each man can have 2 wives. The wives operate independently, engaging in subsistence activities and in general have a low level of social integration. Men and women speak very little to each other. Couples can separate and pair up with other people. The children always remain with the woman, but there will be no bond, not even of affection, between the new husband and the children of the first union. The flute is the Hoti's main instrument. They make 2 types, of deer bone and of cane. It only took us a short while with them to realize the extent to which they live in a closed universe, an increasingly unusual situation in a world engaged in a relentless process of globalization. They know nothing of what happens outside the limits of their world, the world beyond the rainforest. In this enormous paradise, they have never heard of Bin Laden or the Twin Towers, or of religious clashes or nuclear threats. Life passes by at the pace imposed by nature's clock, the only force capable of altering events. Now we can clearly see the threat that Western culture represents for them. Our world is very different, as are the forests that dominate it, which have nothing to do with nature but rather with power and ambition. We were aware that the Hoti were blindly facing a danger which they are powerless to resist. They do not know that beneath the ground on which they walk lie riches which sooner or later will attract the attention of those who speak only the language of finance and economics. This thought plagued us. It pained us to think of their uncertain future, the same future as that already suffered by so many other indigenous groups that live just like them. For the Hoti, the most exquisite product of the jungle is honey. It is the men's job to obtain it. To do this, they travel long distances until they find a honeycomb of sufficient size to make it worth the work necessary to obtain the sought-after nectar. Once they have checked that the honeycomb is large and accessible, they start to cut down the tree with their little axes. They choose only trees whose wood is sufficiently soft to be able to cut them down in relatively little time. They light a fire, then, with burning sticks, make several others where they calculate the branches housing the honeycomb will fall. The smoke stuns the bees and makes them less aggressive. The Hotis collect a great variety of plants and animals for food. Wild fruits, roots and tubers alternate in their diet with crabs, worms and caterpillars. In less than 45 minutes, the tree starts to creak, the sound of internal splintering announcing its imminent fall. The fires are ready, giving off plenty of smoke. Shortly before the tree falls, they take cover from the flying razor-sharp shards of wood. As soon as the tree falls, they confidently approach the branches that contain the honeycomb which have coincided with the place where they lit the fire. The smoke starts to do its work, though the first bees fly out, enraged, their stings at the ready to attack the daring desecrators of their habitat. Without losing a minute, they start to clear gaps in the branches to extract the honeycombs. They collect and consume all the edible substances of the beehives, the honey, the larvae and the pollen. The wax is used to make torches. Despite the smoke, they suffer a great number of stings, but they are used to it, and they believe, rightly, that the poison strengthens them. In some European countries, apitoxin, the main agent in bee stings, is used as a tonic and in the preparation of drugs against allergies and arthritis. Little by little, they extract the wax cells dripping with honey. They collect 4 different types of honey. During the season, when bees are productive, they make almost daily forays in search of beehives. The Hoti are highly respected by neighboring tribes for their knowledge of magic. They know an endless number of medicinal plants, but they are also feared for their capacity attributed to them of casting spells and curses. The Eniepa Indians claim they make powders with which they are capable of killing from a distance. They also say that they know a substance which frightens off the jaguars. When their prey abandon the area in which they are camping, or when the constant menacing presence of felines becomes unbearable, the Hoti move on. Like all nomadic peoples, they travel with all their belongings. Nothing very much, just their spears and blowpipes and their few household utensils. After a time, they may come back to this area, or perhaps they will never return. Whoever knows what a nomad will do. In the interior of the jungles of Central Africa, we find the pygmies, possibly the most ancient nomadic group in the history of mankind. We're in southeast Cameroon, 2 kilometers from the Central African Republic and 30 from the Congo, with the clan of Old Basalimbe, which for several days now has been waiting for the arrival of another pygmy group coming from the north. As is customary in most of Africa, the formal greetings take a long time. Everyone must greet everyone else. Then the men sit down at one end of the camp and the women at the other end. They are happy to see each other again. These meetings do not take place very often. The polyphonic female voices immediately sound out. The pygmies sing from when they are children. This type of song is the jelly which the women intone in the morning before the hunting parties set out. It begins with a single voice which is gradually joined by the others, each one with its own rhythm. They believe that these melodies enchant the animals and make them easier to hunt. The men then start to plan what they will do on the following days. This type of meeting serves to strengthen the bonds with other clans and facilitates new conjugal unions. They are also ideal for major hunts and other activities which require a lot of people. The pygmy home is the simplest of all the nomadic peoples of the world. It is a kind of igloo made of plants which last just a week or two. The men sleep separate from the women and children. In each one, 8 to 10 people huddle together around the fire. Once again, our film crew had to undertake a difficult journey, this time through the African jungle. In this series, reaching the last nomads in the world has always been difficult. They all live in the most remote, inaccessible places on the planet. The women go to a small stream where they will spend the day fishing, guarded by 3 or 4 men armed with spears. First, they have to dam the stream to stop the flow of water. With branches, stones and mud, they build a small dike. In this region, they call themselves Baka, one of the 7 subdivisions of the Pygmy ethnic branch. They don't like being called pygmies. For them, it is a disparaging term used by their black neighbors. The most noticeable physical feature is their small stature. The tallest men can measure 1 meter 55 centimeters, and the women are no more than 1 meter 47. They are also distinguished from the black tribes by their copper-colored skin, very large eyes and ears, and much thinner lips. This type of fishing can only be practiced in the dry season when the small streams have little water and there is virtually no current. Once the main dam is finished, the women spread out downriver, building small dikes every 20 or 30 meters. The pools that are left between the dikes are emptied with the aid of large leaves, leaving the fish without water. This kind of fishing requires a lot of people and so is only practiced on special occasions like this, when 2 large groups have come together. The men remain on the alert, protecting their women from attacks by animals. The rivers are dangerous places. Many animals go there to drink and predators are always on the prowl. Moreover, in order to get the fish, the women have to put their hands into these small caves along the banks and hunt around among the weeds. And it is common to encounter snakes, many of them with deadly venom. The Baka know their jungle to perfection. It is the only habitat they know. They are the original inhabitants of the equatorial jungles of Africa, long before the arrival of the different black tribes from the north. They have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. It could be said that they are a living reminder of the prehistory of man. For them, the jungle is an omnipresent god, who they call Iyengui. This apparent monotheism could also be defined as a kind of pantheism, as God and the world are one and the same thing, the jungle. After the fishing is over, the women seek an area along the riverbanks where they can clean the fish. In this climate, it's of utmost importance to do this as soon as possible, so that the result of their work does not go off. And as always, song and music are present. Every activity they do is accompanied by music. It is the eternal beat of Africa, which will never be silenced. Rhythm runs through their veins. While they clean the fish, they entertain themselves by making sounds in the river. By simply hitting the surface of the water with the palms of their hands and their arms, the Baka women are capable of improvising an aquatic tom-tom. The echo of the baka chants is lost in the treetops of Yengui, the pygmy jungle god, and peace once more returns to the dense forest. Old Baselimbe is out hunting. His skill and experience make him a very reputed hunter. He knows how to imitate almost all the animals, especially the blue duiker, a dwarf antelope highly appreciated for its meat. He calls to them and the duiker answer the call. Then the younger hunters launch an attack with their spears. The baka hunt with spears and with crossbows and poisoned darts. On occasions like this one, when many families come together, they organize hunts with nets in which everyone takes part, men, women, and children. They go into the forest and fence off a large area of land with their nets. Until recently, these nets were made of lianas and took almost 2 months to make. Now they are fishing nets which they get from their Bantu neighbors. Despite the uneven terrain and the dense vegetation, it doesn't take them long to put the nets in place and close the circle. The trap is now ready. Some of them stand in silence surrounding the net. The rest move out from the center of the fenced-off area, driving the animals to the edges. The baka, and especially the women, usually decorate their bodies and faces with tattoos and scarifications which represent clan symbols, while other times these cuts serve magical and therapeutic purposes. The incisions are made with a knife dipped in palm oil, which helps scars to form. As they are driven out of hiding, the small prey flee towards the net where the hunters await them. Once the hunt is over, they look for the animals that have been hit by the poisoned darts. This continues all day long, with the nets being moved to different positions. At night, the dances take place. The baka's traditional dress is a loincloth made of tree bark called luka, though nowadays they usually use cloths which they obtain from neighboring tribes in exchange for products from the jungle. On the days of celebration or for the dances, they usually wear skirts of green leaves. One of the first references to this ethnic group dates from 4,000 years ago. An Egyptian expedition was sent by Pharaoh Cheops II to a Greek jungle to the west of the Mountains of the Moon. There they discovered a small tree-dwelling people who danced and sang in honor of their god. Thus, the first name given to the pygmies was the Dancers of God. The Baka, like other nomadic peoples living in forests all around the world, in addition to hunting, collect wild fruits, roots, tubers, mushrooms, and certain edible insects. But without a doubt, the most sought-after delicacy is honey. Sometimes, as in this case, the beehive is at a great height, on a tree trunk. To get at the honey, they first have to make preparations. They make large rolls of leaves and burning sticks, which will serve to drive out the swarm. They also make baskets with lianas and large green leaves into which the honeycombs will be placed. Once again, they work as a group. It would be very difficult for one man to do this alone. The pygmy is the true inhabitant of the African jungle, much more so than the black races who came here later after their long migrations and still have not adapted to life in the jungle. For over 3,000 years, an alliance has existed between the pygmies and the sedentary groups of farmers that surround them for the exchange of products. Once the preparations have been completed, they start the difficult climb up the tree, through the tangle of parasitic plants that surround the trunk. Down below, the women wait for pieces of honeycomb to start raining down, dripping with the coveted nectar. Though of small stature, the Baka are strong and with broad, very muscular backs. Almost 30 meters up, they reach the beehive and begin to open it up with their axes in a display of balance that would test the finer circus tightrope artists. When the hive has been opened up, they introduce the rolls of leaves and burning sticks to tranquilize and drive out the bees. Shortly after, the first pieces of honeycomb fall to the ground, announcing that the hive is now open. Those standing at the foot of the tree immediately test the quality of their haul. Then one by one, the baskets full of honey are lowered down until they have extracted the entire honeycomb. The leader of the group is obliged to share out the harvest equally among all those that have participated. Of the different types of honey they obtain, the most highly appreciated is ground honey. Yet further evidence of the Baka's profound knowledge of the jungle. For any outsider, this would be simply an ant tunnel, but they know that by digging down 50 or 60 centimeters, they will find a rich haul of black honey, which is the name they give to the sweetest honey of the jungle. Contemplating the jungle and living with the Baka, we had the same thoughts, the same questions as in Venezuela when we were with the Hoti Indians of the Parucito River. How much time do they have left? It's not easy to find a pygmy group like this one, still uncontaminated by certain elements from outside the forest, such as those horrible trousers or the odd piece of plastic, keeping their ancestral culture absolutely alive. The Baka also blindly face the latent threat that surrounds them, the supposed progress which each day creeps a little closer to their territory. They maintain the custom of filing their teeth. When they reach puberty, both men and women file their upper incisors. They place a stick in the mouth to bite into and to hold the teeth firm. With a knife, which they hit with another stick, they chip away at the teeth. The purpose of this process, apart from the aesthetic aspect, is to be able to better rip apart the meat of the animals they eat, as the Baka consume it almost raw. The pygmies frequently move around, settling in different places, but normally remain in an area of around 50 kilometers in diameter. The head of the family, in this case Basalimbe, leads the march with his axe, the benga spear, and a burning stick, which he will carry to the new settlement to be able to light the first fire. This determination to keep and care for the fire, so it never goes out, once again demonstrates the incredible antiquity of the Baka culture. They are the genuine inhabitants of the rainforests of Africa. Probably in the very near future, it will be impossible to witness this age-old culture. One day, not far off, they will leave the jungle as other pygmy tribes are already doing, and will find themselves in a hostile world in which there'll be no place for them. I hope this document, like other voices of denunciation that are making themselves heard throughout the world, will serve to make governments and international organizations aware of the need to protect the last nomads of the jungle. As soon as they arrive at the place where they will construct their huts, Basalimbe sets about the most important task, making the fire. The first flame symbolically confirmed the active possession of the new settlement. The women are in charge of constructing the huts. They cut flexible branches, stick them into the ground and join them together to form two crossed arches. Then they will pass branches from one side to the other until they have a sufficient number of arches. Other thinner branches will join the arches horizontally and serve as a base for the mangongo leaves, which will cover the home and make it impermeable. The family groups are of different sizes depending on the number of wives of the patriarch. Normally, the men have 2 or 3 wives. While they go about their work, old Basilimbe enjoys himself teaching his youngest grandson the secrets of fire. It has always been like this. In these tropical paradises, life goes by imitating nature. Time passes slowly, allowing man to set down roots in his land and to feel proud of his knowledge of the environment in which he lives. Knowledge which is passed on from generation to generation and which enables them to distinguish between what is necessary and what is superfluous. Perhaps that is why the pygmy is one of the longest living peoples on earth. The men cut the central nerves of the mangongo leaves, which will serve as tiles to protect them from the rain. Before finishing, Basilimbe invokes the god of the jungle and requests his protection. Keep the great rains away from our camp. Let the dangerous vermin sate their thirst for blood far from us. Let the elephant continue along its path. Do not allow death to approach, and may there be abundant hunting.